Somewhere in rural Indiana, sitting on a gravel lot about an hour south of Indianapolis, there is a yard full of dozers, excavators, military trucks, and machines that have seen better days. On any given week, at least one of those machines is being loaded onto a shipping container, not for a customer down the road, but for a buyer in Africa, or Australia, or somewhere else most people wouldn't expect a small Indiana equipment dealer to be doing business. That yard belongs to CNC Equipment, and the man behind it is Clinton Chitwood. For viewers who discovered the channel looking for a video about a military truck, the scale of what CNC has become tends to come as a surprise. Over 119 million views, a Patreon membership program, 2 separate YouTube channels, a machine shop with a CNC plasma table, and now, a customer base that stretches across continents. But here's what most people don't realize. None of that was the original plan. The decision that pushed CNC from a local surplus yard into something considerably larger wasn't made all at once. It was built up over years, shaped by a father who figured out how to spot value where others saw junk, a son who had a camera and a YouTube account, and a market that kept changing in ways that forced them to adapt or fall behind. Understanding what CNC Equipment actually decided and why that decision changed everything requires going back to where the whole thing started. Clinton Chitwood didn't start CNC Equipment by accident. The business grew out of a very specific niche, military surplus trucks, and a very specific belief that most people were undervaluing them. The company's formal LLC registration dates to February 4, 2009, filed in Indiana, but the operation had been running before that. According to records and trade coverage, CNC Equipment had been selling used civilian heavy equipment, military surplus trucks, and ex-military construction equipment since at least 2004. The 2009 incorporation was a formalization of something that had already been working. Clint's specialty in those early years was the M35A2, the military's 2.5-ton, 6x6 all-terrain truck, a machine produced by the hundreds of thousands for the U.S. Army. When the government started selling them off as surplus, the price was low enough that most buyers treated them as parts vehicles or basic haulers. Clint saw something different. He started buying them, stripping them down, and rebuilding them into custom configurations, crew cabs, bob frames, air ride suspensions, front and rear steering, things the factory never installed. The customized versions sold for between $20,000 and $55,000. That wasn't a bad margin on vehicles most people thought were worth a fraction of that. The CNC in the company name stands for Clinton and his father Greg. Greg Chitwood wasn't a silent partner. In a video published in January 2026, described as the full history of how CNC Equipment grew, Clint and Greg sat down together to walk through the early days of the business. It was Greg who helped shape the first approach to buying and selling surplus machines, and the two of them built the operation from the ground up in Unionville, Indiana. What neither of them anticipated was that the business would eventually operate in 2 parallel worlds at the same time, one on a physical gravel lot in southern Indiana, and one watched by millions of people on YouTube. Indianapolis, the CNC Equipment YouTube channel launched on October 6, 2012. At the time, the idea of filming heavy equipment work and posting it online was not an obvious business strategy. Most equipment dealers operated through trade publications, eBay listings, and word of mouth. A YouTube channel was an experiment, not a plan. But the channel's description from the beginning made the approach clear. The how-to channel would feature projects, buying machines, working on them, and documenting the process. Everything on the channel was for sale. And there was a separate channel dedicated entirely to equipment listings, so the main channel could focus on the work itself. The format turned out to match something viewers were genuinely looking for. Kevin, a key figure alongside Clint on the channel, became known for detailed mechanical work, the kind of multi-hundred-hour restorations on machines like John Deere excavators and dozers that gave the channel its identity. The combination of Clint's personality, Kevin's technical focus, and the straightforward premise of watching real equipment get bought, fixed, and sold resonated with an audience that appreciated seeing the actual work rather than polished production. More than a decade after that first upload, the channel had crossed 119 million total views. That number is significant because most heavy equipment channels never approach it. The audience CNC built is not a general YouTube audience. It's people who actually know what a dozer undercarriage costs, who understand why a machine with low hours on the engine but worn tracks is still a good buy, and who can tell within the first 30 seconds of a video whether the person on screen knows what they're talking about. And as the channel grew, something else was happening to the equipment market that Clint had built his business around. Something that would eventually force a decision. The military surplus truck market that launched CNC equipment in the early 2000s did not stay stable. Clint had noted it himself in early trade coverage. The market for low-priced, standard military trucks had softened as the broader economy shifted. What had been an underserved niche became more crowded as awareness of these vehicles grew. The broader used heavy equipment market was also changing. Large auction platforms, online bidding, and equipment listing aggregators were reshaping how buyers and sellers found each other. A small yard in rural Indiana could no longer rely on regional buyers driving up the road. The competition for the same machines was now national. The response from CNC wasn't to simplify, it was to expand in a different direction. The company moved its main location to Nashville, Indiana, still in the same southern Indiana region, still roughly an hour south of Indianapolis, and about an hour and a half north of Louisville, Kentucky. The operation grew in scope. Where the early business had focused tightly on military trucks, CNC added excavators, dozers, skid steers, backhoes, and construction equipment alongside the military vehicles. The in-house machine shop gained a CNC plasma table capable of cutting sheet steel up to 5 feet by 10 feet. Custom parts production became part of the offering. Bridget Chitwood, listed as co-owner of CNC equipment, was part of the operation through this period as well. The business had always been a family enterprise, and it remained one as it grew. The YouTube channel expanded alongside the business. A Patreon program launched, offering members early access and ad-free versions of videos for $5 a month. Tucker joined Kevin as a regular presence in build content. The infrastructure around CNC was deepening on both the business side and the content side simultaneously. But the decision that changed the scale of everything wasn't about any of that. It was about where the machines were going when they left the yard.
Signs get in place. The export market for used heavy equipment is not a casual business.
Shipping a dozer to Africa or Australia requires navigating freight logistics, container specifications, international trade requirements, and buyers who often cannot inspect a machine in person before committing. For most small equipment dealers, those barriers are reason enough to focus on domestic buyers and leave international shipping to larger, more specialized operations. CNC equipment made a different calculation. The March 2026 description of CNC's operation, confirmed through their own channel content, specifically noted that this small Indiana yard was shipping heavy equipment to Africa and Australia. That is not a footnote. That is a fundamental shift in who CNC's customers are and what the business has become. To understand why this matters, consider the context. A used excavator or dozer that has aged out of the North American market, machines with high hours, older cab configurations, older hydraulic systems, still has significant working life in markets where infrastructure development is ongoing and where the cost of a newer machine is prohibitive. West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and parts of Australia's rural and mining sectors represent genuine demand for exactly the kind of machines CNC was already buying, repairing, and selling domestically. The decision to service those markets didn't just add new customers. It changed what machines were worth buying in the first place, because the buyer pool expanded. A machine that might have a narrow resale market in Indiana suddenly becomes attractive to a much larger global pool of buyers when the business can credibly ship it anywhere. It also changed what the YouTube channel meant to the business. An audience of over 119 million views, spread across the United States and internationally, is not just an advertising platform, it is a trust-building tool. A buyer in Nigeria or Queensland who has watched dozens of CNC videos showing how machines are inspected, what problems are looked for, and how restorations are done, has a level of confidence in the seller that no cold eBay listing can generate. The YouTube channel and the export business reinforced each other in a way that neither could have done alone. The structure CNC operates with today is more layered than it might initially appear. There is the physical yard in Nashville, Indiana, the gravel lot with machines in various states of repair. There is the sales operation, with listings spread across Machinery Trader, Tractor House, and other platforms, all under Clinton Chitwood's direct contact. There is the in-house machine shop producing custom parts. There is the YouTube channel, with its 2 video per week cadence. There is the Patreon membership, and there is the international shipping operation moving containers to buyers across multiple continents. That is not a one-person operation, and it never really was. The CNC of the name, Clinton and Greg, was always the foundation, but the people who made each of those components work grew over time. Kevin spent over 200 hours on a single John Deere 455E restoration, according to channel documentation. That is not side work. Tucker, featured in Patreon content, joined as an additional mechanic on builds. The operation required a team. The January 2026 history video, where Clint and Greg sat down to walk through how the business grew from its earliest days, was significant partly because of what it represented. A father and son talking about a family business that started with surplus military trucks and ended up shipping machines to Africa. That is not a typical business story. It is also a documentary of a specific kind of American blue-collar entrepreneurship, finding value where others don't see it, building expertise in a niche that seems small until it turns out to connect to a global market. CNC Equipment's channel description still reads the same way it did in 2012. This is the how-to channel. Projects from all aspects. Most things you see are for sale. That simplicity turned out to be a strategy, even if it wasn't designed to be one. The channel's consistency, the same format, the same location, the same kind of machines, the same two people who knew what they were talking about, built something that felt permanent rather than trendy. That permanence paid off when the international market opened up. Buyers who had watched years of content weren't buying from a stranger. They were buying from people they had effectively watched work for the better part of a decade. As of mid-2026, CNC Equipment is operating on multiple fronts simultaneously. The Nashville, Indiana yard continues to receive, repair, and list machines across multiple categories: excavators, dozers, skid steers, military trucks, and attachments. The pricing reflects a broad range. A basic M35A2 military truck listed as a parts vehicle might be priced at a few $1,000s, while a clean 2019 John Deere 135G excavator is priced at just under $90,000. The inventory changes regularly. The YouTube channel continues at its consistent upload pace. The Patreon membership, offering early and ad-free content, remains active with regular updates. The machine shop handles custom parts requests, and the international export operation continues to move containers. The CNC Equipment history video from January 2026 also quietly confirms something about the business that isn't always obvious from the outside. The father-son foundation of CNC was never a marketing angle. It was always the actual structure of the operation. Greg's early role in developing the business, recognizing what surplus machines were worth before the broader market caught on, shaped how Clint approached buying and selling from the beginning. That instinct about undervalued machines carried forward. The same logic that made surplus military trucks worth rebuilding in the 2000s applied to the international export decision later. Used machines that had reached the edge of their value in one market still had significant value in another. The business just needed to be willing to connect those two markets. That is the decision that changed everything. Not a single moment, not a single announcement, but a willingness to follow the value of a machine further than any local buyer would. Clinton Chitwood built CNC Equipment on a straightforward premise: find machines other people undervalue, understand what makes them worth more, and be willing to do the work that closes that gap. What started as a military truck business on a rural Indiana property has grown into an operation that ships equipment to buyers on multiple continents, runs a YouTube channel with over 119 million views, and documents the whole thing with the same casual consistency it started with in 2012. The international export move wasn't a pivot away from what CNC had always been. It was the logical extension of it, applying the same eye for undervalued machines to a larger global pool of buyers who needed exactly what Clint's yard had to offer. The YouTube channel, far from being separate from the business, became the reason buyers on the other side of the world trusted the seller they had never met in person. As of 2026, CNC Equipment is still based in Nashville, Indiana, still buying and restoring heavy equipment, and still running the same 2 video per week schedule it has maintained for over a decade. The machines on the lot keep changing. The approach doesn't. There's a question worth sitting with here. When a small, family-run equipment yard decides to start shipping dozers to Africa, most people in that business would call that too complicated, too expensive, and too far outside the lane they know. Was Clint's decision the right one, or was it the kind of move that only works when you've spent a decade building exactly the right audience before you needed them?